The Greyjoys aren't the most popular of the great houses in Game of Thrones, but this family is one of my favorite topics. I'm sure many book readers will agree with me and know why. So like my Baratheon and Lannister family tree videos on my channel, I'm only covering a small history of the family tree since George Martin hasn't written enough backstory to cover as much as my Targaryen family tree video. The Greyjoys and a lot of the other lords from the Iron Islands claim descent from the Grey King. He was the first Iron King and is one of the legends in Game of Thrones that lived so long ago that no one really is sure if he ever lived. It is said he lived over 1,000 years and he married a mermaid. Yeah, this story is full of surprises. The Ironborn are very different compared to the rest of Westeros. They remind me a lot of the wildlings. They're kind of outsiders who are always starting problems. They live in harsher conditions, believe in a different god, and have some weird customs. Before Aegon Targaryen came along with his dragons and conquered Westeros, most lands had their own kings, and after they died, the line of succession would pass to their eldest son. In the Iron Islands, after a king died, anyone can really become the next king in a voting process called a King's Moot. 300 years ago, it was decided the Greyjoys would be lords of the Iron Islands. There's a few Greyjoys George Martin writes about, like the Red Kraken, Dalton Greyjoy, who the Ironborn worship because of how much trouble he caused from such a young age, or Vicon Greyjoy, the first lord of the Iron Islands, but I'm going to focus on the last 3 generations. And that begins with Quaelon Greyjoy. I know I just went on about how wild and uncivilized the Ironborn are, but Quaelon kind of breaks this cycle. He was smart enough to realize their ways of reaving and attacks on the west coast of Westeros should be behind them, and it was time to be a true part of the Seven Kingdoms. It's too bad he died in 283 AC during Robert's Rebellion, and his eldest living son Balin didn't share these ideals. He was more of a traditionalist. Quaelon was married 3 times, and for some reason, all of them are unnamed. First, with a lady of House Stonetree. They had 3 sons together, Harlan, Quinton, and Donal, who all died in childhood. His next batch of kids, with the second wife, a lady of House Sunderly, had slightly better luck. 4 out of 5 kids survived childhood this time around. This is the group of Greyjoys that made me make this video instead of a Martell or Tyrell family tree. Drogon died at age 14 because of a game called the Finger Dance. It's a game where 2 throw an axe back and forth to each other that usually ends with someone losing fingers. And that's exactly what happened to Drogon when his brother Aeron threw the axe that cut off part of his hand. Eventually, his wound got infected and that game cost him his life. His third wife was the Lady of House Piper. They had one son named Robin, who once again didn't live very long. Aeron remembers him as a sickly idiot boy. But let's focus on the interesting characters. Balon's the dummy that threw away all the progress his father was making for the Iron Islands. Balon was a typical Ironborn who was fearless, a great sailing captain, and loved to attack the innocent. The moment he became lord, he began the construction of the Iron Fleet, 100 warships. After their completion, he began the Greyjoy Rebellion. He wanted independence from the Seven Kingdoms and declared himself King of the Iron Islands. The rebellion barely accomplished anything and didn't last very long. It cost Balon his 2 older sons' lives, and his youngest son Theon was taken hostage to Winterfell to assure he wouldn't cause any more trouble. Now onto probably my favorite character in the books. It's too bad Euron is a pretty boring villain in the TV show. This guy is pretty much as cruel as Ramsay, but way more interesting. He was exiled by Balon for sleeping with one of his younger brother Victarion's salt wife. Victarion ended up beating her to death, and Balon exiled Euron so Victarion wouldn't do the same to him. Euron began traveling the world and made a name for himself. His entire crew are mutes, who he had their tongues removed. His ship is called the Silence for a reason. I don't know how trustworthy of a character Euron is, but he says he sailed the smoking ruins of Valyria and found a dragon egg and a dragon horn. No one makes it back from the ruins of Valyria. He tried to hatch the egg, but failed and threw it off his ship. He was smart enough to keep the dragon horn though. The dragon horn is supposed to be able to give the owner of it control of a dragon. More recently in the story, he came across a ship with 4 warlocks, and like a true Ironborn, he took them and whatever they had. This was the start of his new interest. If you remember, the warlocks have blue lips from drinking something called Shade of the Evening. Drinking it makes you see some weird shit and possibly prophecies. Euron eventually makes his way back to the Iron Islands, coincidentally at the same time Balin is killed. Theon isn't around, so Aeron decides to hold a king's moot to decide the next ruler. Aeron, like most of his family, can't stand Euron, and was sure he wouldn't win, since he's been gone for so long and Asha and Victarion have been around and are loved. Euron promised the people he would marry Daenerys and together would take Westeros. He doesn't care for gold and treasure and easily won the people's vote. He sends his brother Victarion off to greet with Daenerys and Meereen and makes Aeron one of his prisoners on his ship. Victarion never forgave his older brother and intends to marry Daenerys for himself. He runs into the Red Priest Moqorro on the way to Meereen and begins to follow both the Drowned God and R'hllor. Moqorro is far better at reading visions than Melisandre, making his story just as interesting as Euron's. There's a bit more I could talk about, since George Martin released an Aeron POV chapter from the upcoming book The Winds of Winter, but trust me, all you book readers will get a lot more enjoyment reading it for yourself over me summarizing it. If you haven't checked it out, I'll link the chapter in the description, along with my last family tree video, House Baratheon. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll start working on my next family tree video after I get a few more ideas out there. Thanks for watching.